Hello and welcome to Podcrash. Not sure what number it is. Everyone's in lockdown.
You're not doing the numbers anymore.
Yeah, we're not doing the numbers anymore, so let's forget about it. What's most important is that our guest this evening is Luke Patience, 2012 Olympic silver medalist, 2016 Olympic competitor, and 2021 Olympic hope. Well, no, selected, not even a hopeful. He's going.
Yeah.
If it happens. So welcome, Luke.
If it happens,
Hello.
Yeah.
How we did?
That was just this most like pan face intro ever. Like Phil's just like, hi. We should say he's a sailor, by the way, in the 470 class, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever that means, 470 class.
Yeah, no. That's the thing about sailing. There's this whole dialogue behind the sport, which is completely underground that no one's ever heard of. It's a boat, basically.
Well, we're going to get into this because as cyclists, we're very keen to learn about sailing since we've recently imported a sailor into our ranks with the performance director. So we're keen to share a bit of information back and forth so Phil can impress his boss when he goes back in after this is all over.
Yeah.
He'll know the difference between his crank and his sail.
Yeah. We have cranks and boats.
Yeah, that's what I meant, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
That was a comparison, yeah. I was trying my best with my terminology there. So yeah, if you didn't know, Luke's a sailor. So Luke, so we're going to kick off with you're joining us from Tyree, but born in Aberdeen. So what's your kind of backstory in getting into sailing, and where did that kind of take place for you?
Yeah, I was born in Aberdeen, but it's quickly that turned into West Coast. Yeah, but my old man is a super keen sailor. You know, he's the guy that's reading up and checking all out, and he knows everything before anyone else does because he's so enthusiastic. So it was probably inevitable. I was always going to get into it. But I actually come from a long line of fishermen and lifeboatmen. You know, if you believe in the whole phrase "it's in your blood," then that's definitely. On my mother's side, they're all lifeboatmen and what have you, and then my dad's side, they're all. Do you know where Bucky is in the northeast of Scotland?
I thought that was a drink in Scotland.
Yeah, no. Ironically, that's made the southwest of England, isn't it?
Yeah.
Down near Bristol. But Bucky with an IE. No, that all up there. That's where the whole family's from. Northeast fishermen with a beard, you know, catching the herring, and so probably it was always going to be in my blood, I guess. It was only my father that skipped a generation of making a life for themselves in the water, and then obviously, I guess the reason we're here talking is that I ended up doing that as my career and passion. So it kind of it started early. Yeah, it was West Coast. It was, I suppose, it was like anything. I assume you guys are the same. You just picked up a bike and you joined a club or something, and you liked riding your bike, and I just got hooked on sailing boats from a young age.
Is it as simple as that though? Because the whole kind of pathway to sailing seems a little bit complicated. Because Ben Ainsley grew up in Macclesfield, and that's nowhere near the sea. And I'm like, it doesn't seem, cycling's a niche sport, but to actually be a competitive sailor seems like a bit of a tricky path, I guess.
Yeah, it is.
Or can be.
Well, yeah, it is. And I would be lying if I said it's easy to get into. It's not. I mean, they're desperately trying to make it easier to get into. And I got into it because I lived in a part of the world where I grew up in Helensburgh and Rue, just next to Loch Lomond. And my dad, my mum and dad and their friends, family friends, also had kids similar age, and they were all into sailing. I mean, half the reason we moved west from Aberdeen was because my dad was so pumped on sailing the whole time, wanted to be in a more saily part of the world, more saily part of Scotland anyway. So yeah, I mean, we lived next to Marina, and it was because all the mums and dads of the sort of the village were, God, it sounds so middle class, doesn't it? But really, it really isn't. It was tiny wooden boats that were awful, and we were just out splashing about and playing in the water, with boats that might have been 20 years old and stuff like that. So it is hard to get. I mean, I know Ben was born in Macclesfield, but I think most sailors probably live in a part of the world where they could get to it easily after school, and there might be some club or something going on. I was just lucky that was happening.
Yeah, and this is a traditional part in the podcast when we get someone on from a different sport, because we haven't found one that Phil hasn't done yet and been German champion in. So Phil, have you ever tried sailing?
I actually sailed on.
Here we go.
No. I sailed after Rio in the Lake District. I did like some Team GB sports event. There was actually GB sailor. I can't remember her name, and she took us out in like a sailing boat, and she let me steer the boat.
Really?
Yeah.
After Rio,
yeah. There was like a Team GB day. I can't. What's the name again?
I don't think that would have been in the Lake District.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I don't think any northern lass on the team.
No, I think she travelled up. It was like a Team GB appearance. That was quite fun, to be fair. Wasn't much wind, but I enjoyed it.
Well, I've just thought of the caption for this episode, which is when we do find out her name, we'll say this is the person that Phil forgot.
Yeah. Was she a medalist?
No.
From Rio?
No, I think she was trying to make the Olympics.
Okay, right, yeah. British sailing team did a good job of, sadly for those who didn't qualify, they were then put around the country to help host events and stuff that were going on, which I'm sure they hated every minute of.
Whenever I speak to you about hosting events, it's always in St. Lucia and shit like that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. No, you'll play it down. You'll be like, "Oh, I've got no money, and sailing's a hard graft, and all this kind of shit." And then I'm like, "Where are you off to next week?" And he says, "Miami."
Oh my God, you're living the dream.
I'm surrounded by billionaires that I've still got not hate me to buy the next bit of fuel in my car. It's who you surround yourself by.
Just never pick up the bill at the end of the table at the end of the night.
Yeah.
But you talked on like it's interesting. You talked about like being from like a middle class background, I guess, with sailing and doing it like at a fairly basic level with wooden boats and stuff like that. Because that's another kind of classic assumption about sailing, is that you have to be quite wealthy to get into it.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, for clarity, I'm absolutely not from a middle class background. I'm just acutely aware that when you talk about, my dad was in sailing, it just sounds like that. But no, we were totally broke. But I think what they do better and better now is boats are essentially made cheaper. They find cheaper ways to build things, and like a designer that has done a lot of work with me he was one of the guys that did like rotor molding and plastic and stuff, so he could just pump out boats left, right, and center. I mean, that was his retirement plan, and it worked. But now you can get kids, where we train down in, hardly ever train really, but down in Weymouth, where the games were held for London for us, that has busloads of school kids coming in and doing it. But it wasn't. That's new. When I'm 33 now, so when I was 7 years old when I was doing this on the West Coast, and a boat then that we'd get in and learn to sail in is called an optimist. It's basically a bathtub with a sail, with a bit of canvas. I mean, it was £100 for the whole thing. So it's not. Of course, what I do now is very different. But back then, buying a boat and going sailing was as cheap as 100, maybe 200 quid for the boat, and I have no idea what marina fees there were to launch, but nothing, probably peanuts, So it sounds much more extravagant than it was in those days, and it was freezing as well. Like we are, being the whole anywhere really this far north in Europe is freezing in the winter, isn't it? So I remember we have to. When we were learning, you'd have to snap your main sheet is the rope that controls the main sail. So, because it was frozen solid in the morning, you'd be snapping it around your knee just to get it, so it would actually run through all the systems in the blocks of the boat. It's just ridiculous. Like the boat wouldn't even work properly. So it is much more humble than I make it sound.
Do you even warm up sailing, or do you just sit there and wait for the wind?
You kind of like, there's no wind. Yeah, you're just sitting and waiting. Like you're at the mercy of whatever.
Yeah.
I'm still on the fence as to whether this story is true because I've still got this image of you like on the bow, glass of Don Perignon, little jacuzzi at the back, and if there's no wind, just jump out in the jet ski, mate. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah. As a 7-year-old, I've been hammered since that day on Dom. Yeah. I tell you what, that is very much the aspiration now as a sailor to end up in that position.
So, how did you manage to like progress from being in a 100 quid boat all the way up to like making a career out of it? Like, how does that work for you guys?
So, I guess this is stuff you probably hear, isn't it? Time and time again when you speak to. Oh, actually, I've listened to a few podcasts. Not pod crashes. Sorry, they're not. Yeah, yeah. I was super keen at a load of sports. I was just competitive, you know. I was a pain in the ass for my friends, probably. I took everything too seriously, you know. Whether it be the game of tag or who can climb the tree the highest and all that, everything was a competition for me. So back then I was doing, you know, gymnastics.
Oh yeah, I did that for a little while. There's no shame in that.
No, there's not. I just think into the photos that my old man's got of me in a leotard, jumping over the mats and doing that. It's just so funny.
I never got to leotard level. I was still in gym shorts.
You must have been sick, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. And tennis and all that, but I'm small in stature, so those were quickly, you know, not very strong, and I'm small, you know. So it's the bug for competition. I quickly, once I learned to master the actual boat, you know, so that you're competent, you can go out alone, you're not capsizing or wiping out or anything. It then progressed into racing. Still just tiny wee club races at the local marina on a Tuesday afternoon or whatever, and I was totally hooked. And it's the thing that I was hooked on mostly was I really enjoyed the creativity of sailing. So there's no lines obviously in the water, whether like a tennis court or a sprinting track or whatever. It was the fact that there were so many ways to skin the cat of how you'd win the race, and it's the creativity of how you would go about that, and that it's full autonomy. It's just you in the boat. There's nobody. The only thing that's dictated is what the course is, but that's still a completely organic thing anyway. So I just got the bug for racing because of how you went about the race and approached it, and then we would do a Scottish Traveller series. So mums and dads would put the boats on a big trailer, and we'd all go up to say Loch Tunnel, or we'd go up to Loch Morley. These are places in basically the Highlands and Cairngormsville in Scotland, or we'd go to Aberdeen, Stonehaven. You know, we travel and do this Scottish Traveller series all year, and yeah, I 1 year I won that, and I kind of got scouted and picked to go to the Scottish squad. I was at that age. I'm still 10 or 11 at that moment. That is what I'm describing now. You know.
That kind of brings me on to my next question about like what's the fundamental that makes a good sailor. Like I joked with you once saying that like it's basically just Pocahontas. You have to lead the colours of the wind and then make the best of it, basically. But like what do you think actually makes a good sailor? Because it sounds like there's a big like artistic, almost creative element to it.
I think the skill set that we possess is your war strategists, because it's all dynamic. Everything's moving. Nothing's a stationary target. So when I say war strategy, like you're managing risk essentially the whole time. You're weighing up risk reward on moving targets the whole time. What are you willing to give up? And you're trying to think 2-3 moves ahead in a race the whole time. So I think that is the primary skill set of being a good racer. Because the reality is that it's not physical like what you boys do. You know, It's not even close to the same level of, you know, we could get away with being, you know, it's maybe 30% about your body and your physique and your how fit you are, 70% decision making. So yeah, I think that would be the primary skill set, is you're in a full strategic. And I mean that from both like topography and reading the wind and the water and tides and what time of day it is the air stable or unstable, all that, as well as you're on the racetrack with 30 other boats that are continually moving and all this the whole time. So when you're cycling, what's the race called where it's madness? It looks like about 5,000 people on the track.
Madison.
Madison.
Madison, yeah. Like I watched that, how much moving and everything is going on. Like it almost could be something like that, you know?
Like when I'm ever like kind of watching the sport, it seems like the kind of jostle at the start line seems pretty physical, and then like it's not unusual for you guys to end up hitting each other and stuff like that, is it?
Yeah, they all often say rubbing is racing.
Oh, okay, right.
I guess you'll get your elbows out in the bike now and then as well. But but there are rules in place. You cannot. I mean, there's a rule in our sport that if there's any contact, someone is just to blame, and so someone must be disqualified if it goes to a hearing after the race.
Oh, so even if it's like in your car, you can have a non-fault accident.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one's to blame. It's just one of these things. They have to pick someone who's to blame.
Yeah, we don't have that. There's always a blame. Yeah, because like I know it's mad. So what we do is to say there's a collision, which is a big word. It might be simple, just a little brush next to each other. Normally, both boats will shout protest. That's the official term we have to shout. You know, protest. You know?
They do a little bit in Morse code and have a few flags on the go as well.
Yeah. I take my captain's hat off first and hail protest. Phil, I don't wear a captain's hat.
Only in bed.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
Do you kind of?
You feel like especially going through a hearing when you get ashore, like you see in some jury hearing or something. It's all very archaic.
Talk us through the actual stuff that goes on the boat as well. So you're like one man of a 2-man team as well.
Yeah. So on the boat I sail is our discipline is the men's double hander. Soon like rowing and all that. They're kind of the 8-man, the 4-man. You know, kind of similar in sailing. And so I'm the men's double hander. So I sail with my teammate. Is nicknamed Twiggy. I mean, he's known through the world as Twiggy because he's kind of like minus skeleton wrapped in cling film. Like he is just he's about that thin and is 6'4". You know, he's some specimen. He's a wicked lad. But he's so I sail with him, and we have. It's kind of like a wee Formula One car in water. You know, it's not. You know, Lewis Hamilton wouldn't get in his car and go and get milk from the shops in his Formula One car. Like our boat's like that. It's a pristine race machine, you know, and there's loads of systems inboard, and you're like on it. You're not in the boat, if that makes sense. You're kind of on top of it. Yeah.
Does that kind of present like a good advantage to you guys that you've got, you know, someone who's 6 foot whatever, and then you're a little bit shorter? Is that kind of the ideal combination, or can you have two guys the same size? He's
like an extra sailor if he's 6 foot.
Yeah. Well, exactly though. You're like the taller you are, it's just physics, leverage. So the further you are away from the center of the boat, the more leverage you have pulling against the sails, and obviously the wind's pushing the sails and trying to push the boat over. So if you're further away, it's more, we call it righting moment. Like the further you are away, and you know, it's just so much easier to keep the boat more powered for longer, especially power. You know.
So he's the kind of glory hunter though. He's the one that's hanging off the side of the boat.
He's stood to the side, hand above his head, you know, and underwater, back drowning, like holding all the systems in my hand, like try to steer the boat in the right direction.
And then, so like as a young like aspiring sailor, like we kind of talk about this with cycling as well, because especially for the endurance guys, like they either fall into two camps, as like Tour de France or Olympics. Like it depends what's the pinnacle. For you guys, is it kind of the same thing? Because obviously you got kind of like Olympic sailing, then you got America's Cup and all that kind of stuff. Like what was your kind of like dream when you were growing up? Was it always Olympics, or did you want to do the Americas or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was. We've got three things in sailing, which two you described: the America's Cup, the Olympics, and then there's the ocean race.
Yeah,
the World Ocean Race, and they're the three big things in our sport. And for me, I as a really young lad, like 7, 8, 9, I was watching the round the world yacht race, the ocean race, and that was really gripping to me. I just thought it, because I really enjoyed the adventure of sailing. The fact that it's a transportation device as well as as well as sport, So I would love the thought of going on these great adventures on a boat and stuff. And so the ocean race was always really gripping for me. But then I remember watching the Sydney Games, and that was the hook. Quite early on, I was 13 when I watched Sydney, and up until that point, you sort of could have said I'm not sure what. I was just enjoying sailing and enjoying racing at that stage, but Sydney did it for me. Like I at that point, it was over. Any thought of what else might have been was done. I was upset. But it's funny because everyone does it at different times. Like, wasn't it when you were your episode with Katie? I don't know if it was a joke, but they were saying, Phil, you were 2 years out or something for racing for GB, and you were told, you need to win a gold medal. The outcome of this is a gold medal. I don't know if that was a joke or not when I was listening to it.
Yeah.
So 2 years before London was your Olympic career started.
Yeah. I spoke to I was riding for Germany before that, and then I was in Germany. I never even thought about riding the Olympics or anything like that. For me, it was always becoming world champion was the goal, or making the world championships. And then when I sat down with Jan van Eyden and he said your goal should be Olympic gold, I was like he's taking the piss. But then when I moved over, pretty much the whole program is driven to the Olympics. So Olympics was never really in my mind before I even started cycling. I wanted to be an endurance rider, but quickly learned I wasn't an endurance rider.
Yeah, you have to understand the specimen we were faced with when this guy came over from Germany. Like, his number one goal wasn't cycling; it was World of Warcraft.
Oh yeah, dude. I had a severe World of Warcraft addiction where I played like 14 hours a day. Forgot to eat. It was terrible.
He'd rush through his session and then just disappear, and we're like, Phil, we've still got like an hour and a half of the session left. Like, he's just gone. And then he was like,
army's getting obliterated right now.
What was I thinking?
No.
Imagine doing that nowadays. You get kicked off the program.
What was the name of the wolf that you rode?
I can't remember. I can't remember.
Was it
like
Manton or something like that?
No, that was my character. I can't remember the word. I can't remember what it's called. I know what you mean. That was like 10 years ago.
We've probably talked about this in the podcast before, but this was brilliant because this was when Phil didn't have a girlfriend, and we were like, Phil, you just go out and get yourself a girlfriend, and we went through various things, and he's like, no, you don't understand, there's plenty of fit girls in World of Warcraft. and then we were like, mate, you understand these guys are just like avatars, they don't actually look like that.
It was a bad time. It was a bad time in my life.
Learn your lesson somehow, hey?
Yeah.
Anyway, so like, I want to pick up on a little bit about, like, because obviously the ocean race is seen as like an adventure, kind of like really dangerous sport as well. Like, when you were growing up and obviously having that kind of like element of I want to say lifeguards, but I don't mean that, lifeboatmen in the family and stuff like that. Was there ever like a moment where like you kind of realized the situation you were in when you kind of got caught out by the weather, or like, was there ever kind of like a moment where you're like, wow, the ocean has kind of got control of me, I don't have control of it?
I reckon I've had one or two instances where I felt properly put in my place, by the whole thing. It sounds so hippie to say the ocean, but nonetheless, one was Rio, and we went out. I think we were training in. I think it was in September, possibly a year out actually from Rio, I think. And we had big southwesterly swells, big storms, and I remember we would race out the heads of the Rio sort of basin, so out past Sugarloaf Mountain and essentially out to sea. Proper kind of. And these boats, my boat's called 470 because it's 4.7 meters long, right? Original, huh? And but I remember we were towing out, and honestly, I felt so unbelievably small in these ocean swells. I cannot describe how they were so unbelievably big. I mean, your whole boat's disappeared. As one boat goes down in the trough of a wave next to you, and you're on the peak, and then you go in the trough and they're on the peak, you still wouldn't see each other. Like completely dwarfed. And then what's scary about when the seas are that big is if you're close to land, you hear them crashing on the shore, and it's like this dull thunder that's just constant. You know, when you hear thunder that's kind of close, and you just hear that roar the whole time, and you're reminded that if for any reason you're stuck or caught out, you're gonna be getting absolutely slammed on whatever it was, you know, and there's some force out there. But my grandfather was a great storyteller, and he always would tell me stories about, you know, the lifeboat men and what they had to do, you know, up in the North Sea, you know, and saving left, right, and centre, and how they'd lose men. You know, he's like lost men, he'd always say, you know, and a couple of men that were lost.
I shouldn't laugh, but it's just the way you were saying it.
You can just imagine old Scott's grandfather telling these stories, you know. So I think I kind of have always appreciated. If I'm honest, I always feel small. You have to. If you don't feel small out there, then you are a fool, and it might not last very long at that point. Old salty sea dog, you know. But it is true.
Did you turn around when the waves were like that big in Rio, or did you stay out there?
Cracked on, went training. I mean, we got to the stage where the further offshore we are, the safer we are. You know, so
really?
But it's amazing to sail the boat when the seas are that big, because they're throwing the boat around so much that the sails are hardly ever any consistency of power through the boat.
I mean, we know the power of the waves at Rio. We went there on holiday a year before the games with another teammate of ours called Kian Amadi, and he got sunstroke on the first day because he thought he's got like an Iranian heritage, so he didn't think he needed to put sunscreen on. So like he's already blistered, and after one day, and then he decides to call himself the Wave Master because he can deal with these waves. So like, and these things are like,
I don't know, like 8 foot or something like that.
And the current was so strong.
Is it on Copacabana or Ipanema or something?
Yeah.
It didn't matter to the Wave Master; it was anywhere. And like, I remember, like, you know, because there's a lot of theft and stuff out. Like, there'd always be one of us at the water looking after the stuff and keeping an eye on it. And I remember just seeing like Phil and Kian, like Phil's standing in at his knees, just like, nah, it's too dangerous. And then Kian's like getting dragged out in the swell. Like, he put his little kind of head up every time, and then like a wave would just smack the back of his head. He'd be drawn back under. He'd stand up again, get drawn back under, and then he has the audacity to come out of the water and argue with the lifeguard about there being a red flag.
And he had cuts all over his body as well from being dragged underwater on the sand and stuff.
Yeah, and I bet did he have his that's a classic when you're half drowning and then one wave rips your shorts off, so you have to, and now you're naked also, and somehow insult to injury.
That doesn't actually happen, does it?
It does, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite fitting because he described it as being like sexually assaulted by the waves, so it kind of fits.
It's actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Use slightly different terminology, but we'll leave it there. But yeah, so when was the kind of point where you like turned pro and then started to kind of have 2012 in the horizon as being the kind of first major event?
So I turned pro or full time when I was 18. God, what year is that? That was 2005 was my first full-time season. It's funny to say the word pro. When I think back to how we operated, it was anything but professional. Thinking back, but you're young, aren't you? You don't know what you're doing. Suddenly you travel the world.
Now go on. You can tell us a few bits and pieces because like Phil shared about World of Warcraft. So go on.
Yeah, well, oh God, too many. I mean, you're 18. You've just been given the T-shirt which says British Sailing Team. You know that the British Sailing Team is, like BC, it's the most successful nation for the sport in the world at that point. And so we worked hard, but we played hard as well. And it was, in the end, it is to the detriment of your results. But our first World Championships were in San Francisco in 2005. You're 18. You can't even get let into a bar. Well, you can maybe get away with it, but ultimately You're not meant to be. And we would just, I don't know, it's just, there was a few too often it became the norm that you'd sail with a hangover. You know, you're training, not talking about a world champs here, you know, you train, you'd operate that, well, it's fine, we'll just go on, we'll crack on with a hangover anyway. Quickly realise when you're continually getting your arse handed to you, you might need to fuck up your ideas. But it all started in 2005, yeah. Why? Because 2005 was when London got their bid, wasn't it? And interestingly, I was with my teammate then, Twiggy as well, actually, and two other lads. Stuart, who was my teammate, who I went on to win our medal in London with. Because sailing's a bit funny. You do change about teams through your career. It's quite common. You're not with the same person the whole time. Anyway, and I remember being in the kitchen in my house in Scotland. We were doing a Costa del West Coast Scotland training camp, and we got the bid, and we were just all proper excited in the kitchen, but arguing between the four of us who would be representing, you know, because it's only one boat per nation. So it's a really vivid memory of when we got that bid, and we'd done a year of drinking and sailing and not getting very far, and it was at that point when it got the bid that jerked me into something like, actually, hang on a minute, you know, because in our sport it takes so. You rarely see an Olympic medalist who hasn't been producing proper full-time in the class for 6 years. Rough, you know, there's the odd anomaly, but you rarely see anyone on the Olympic podium without 6 years under their belt. It's a pattern we've sort of seen in our class. So, you know.
No, I think like I think at British Cycling it was more or less the same, but I don't know if you're kind of of the same opinion as us, that it's really kind of changed quite recently. So like, I guess for the first year of academy, or even the second, maybe the third, people were just kind of going out and getting pissed and calling up coaches on their voicemail and things like that, and throwing eggs around the place and getting in trouble all the time. But I think like that seems to have changed a bit now. Like they all like behave like saints from day one now.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, I can't. It's funny, isn't it? Because we're, I suppose what's similar, three of us are being part of a team that's extremely successful, and I can't help but, I have no strong opinion, but I can't help but think it's part of a machine. It's a machine now, really, isn't it? It's a machine, you know, and it's a successful machine. That's objectively speaking, it is a successful machine. That you can't deny that. I'm sort of quietly cautious about becoming just a cog in a machine, though. And I would never like to think that it would take away people's personality, for one, but also the individual traits that you hold as a human that actually makes you blossom and flourish and be good at what you do. And I really worry for big successful machines that it drives that out of people. I'm not suggesting it does at British Cycling or it does at British Sailing, but there's no doubt about it. If you get on a scale, that'll be driven out of you more with a big successful team than if you're just doing it alone. So there's a point somewhere where it's tricky, and I'm not sure where I stand with all that, but I don't know if that makes sense. But despite the success, it's a shame, I think, for some athletes that maybe just don't fit into it. It would have been good otherwise.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it seems quite common across a lot of the sports. Like maybe it's just the maturity of a lot of the funding or something like that. But even, you know, we're speaking to Joe Clark from Kayak, and, you know, he was saying that he had to what was it? Forge a Flesher's band in Loughborough, and then that would be his like annual event. Basically, the whole kayak team would just try and sneak into Flesher's and pull out the BOA card to try and get in the door and all this kind of stuff. But now it's kind of like it's straight and narrow and all the rest of it. So it's going to be funny to see how it pans out, because it's like you want that character and that longevity there, and to have that balance helps you with that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be too easy to hate something if all of your individuality is taken away, especially if how you see things is a little different. and how you should go about it.
But you're kind of given a good degree of like almost kind of freedom, I guess, within your setup. So like as far as I'm aware, the way it kind of works is that you have to kind of like pitch, this is what my season's going to look like, and then they basically kind of give you the funding and say, okay, off you go. Whereas for us, it's very kind of regimented. I've been pretty cavalier in describing it, but you get what I mean.
Essentially, yeah. You pick out what you think is the right season for you and the right training venues, because you pick places that maybe address your weaknesses. Like weather conditions address your weaknesses.
Well, and that just happens to be Miami. And
yeah, guys, so sorry. We just have to go to St. Lucia again, and then the obvious next place is Cape Town, and yeah. But no, it's all it is like that is the process we go through, but it's definitely not. Off you go, lads. Pack the container and off we go to the camping, whatever.
Yeah, how do you get your boats to all these places? Do you ship them or do they go on the plane?
Yeah, ship them. We can fly them because they're small enough, but that's costly. That would be if something went wrong and we needed to get it. Because we'll ship them in 40-foot containers with our coach boat, which is just like a 6-meter speedboat, basically. We ship our equipment in a 40-foot container, and depends where we go, but most places you sort of lose it for about 3 to 4 weeks, 5 weeks, maybe even. So we run a 3-boat program. So we've got 3 identical boats that are probably in any corner of the globe at any point. They're all now in the UK, obviously.
Yeah.
with COVID.
And do you enjoy the travel, and do you feel as if that adventure bit that you saw from the ocean race is kind of fulfilled by training for the Olympics? Because I guess from the first look it might seem like quite a sanitized version of sailing. But your kind of like day-to-day life actually sounds like there's a good bit of adventure involved in that.
Yeah, there is. There's a whole heap. It's such a strange sport because there's so many variables that are unmeasurable in our sport, and so there's not a definitive, even methodical. Well, there is a methodical process, obviously, but there's not a definitive way that it should happen and how you go about improving something or getting better or faster. And so that lends itself to the adventure, I think, and so it is there, but I have to admit, I'm extremely privileged and proud to be saying I'm going to a third Olympics if it ever happens. But it's different now. It was much more of an adventure in the early years, and now it is, because you get to a stage, which I'm sure you boys are and we're the same. If you know you hit your numbers, you know that is good enough to be right at the front and or the best. And I've experienced, if I get all the process right and I race my best, I know that my best is good enough to win the boat races. So something's taken away, and adventure has to no longer be the competition because you know the outcome of that if you get it all right. And so somewhere in that journey, the adventure has to exist in the daily routines and operations and things that you go through. But so that makes it feel more like a business compared to when you're young, or when I was young. It was all outcome orientated. I was dreaming the whole time, dreaming about winning the race, dreaming about winning the competition. I don't even think about that now,
And this is kind of very loosely connected to the adventure theme, but Phil and I, or me and different teammates, have always joked, like, if we get a really shit race, we kind of just joke that we'll just cycle out the velodrome and just cycle home.
It doesn't matter where we are.
Like, it could be Australia, Belarus, anywhere like that. Like, if you've had an absolute like stinker of a race, do you just look at Twiggy and be like, mate, let's just go the other way?
Yeah, follow the sun.
Yeah.
Follow the sun into the sunset, holding hands.
No, him looking suave as fuck off the side and you getting doused again.
yeah, me hanging on for dear life. If it's in Japan, we say, right, it's karaoke bar tonight.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
I quite like that, though, saying we'll just cycle out the velodrome and we're gone.
Yeah, the best bit was that one of the guys, it was after he got like a real telling off for having no puncture repair stuff, and he was just like, fuck it, I'm just going to cycle home. And we're in Belarus at the time, and we're like, mate, you've still got a flat tire. Like, what? Like, this escape doesn't actually work for this scenario. So talking about like 2012, going into that, it's a pretty big deal to have a kind of home Olympics to be your first Olympics, and then and also I kind of want to touch on that kind of like selection element, because you've talked about, you know, hitting your numbers, and like, how do you create differentiation within the team? Is it just, is it just based on the competition, or is there actually kind of measurable elements within that?
What, in terms of how we get better?
No, how you get selected.
Oh, how you get selected. Oh, so it's a long process. So what will happen is about 2 years out, we might. Actually, I'm not. In fact, I'm contractually bound not to talk about this.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I just realised that as I started talking about it.
I mean, what are you guys hiding? We've got an open selection policy. It's on the internet.
Ah, right. Well, yeah, God, thank God I caught myself. No, it's one of our British Embasy's closely guarded secrets we're not allowed to talk about publicly.
About your selection process?
Yeah. Honestly, I'm not.
Why is that?
Joking. Of course, I talk about it. You know.
That sounds so Freemasons.
Oh.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we're back. I know. I'm not allowed to talk about that. It's weird, isn't it? But needless to say, what's not a secret?
Yeah, you're so keen to get away from the topic. You're like, forget about that. But needless to say, yeah, it was a great experience.
But what is no secret is we're often, because we announce it all over the media, or the sailing media, is we try to select a year out from the games. It's been one of the cornerstones of our success, is that we go through the process where we can select a year out. And it's because we need to give that boat, because it's one boat per discipline, so 10 disciplines in sailing. We'll give that boat as much time thinking about the Olympics and the venue to get ready, rather than thinking about the races to try and even be on the start line. And we feel like that's been one of our biggest successes in British sailing, is to give the athletes that, what would you call it? Just that freedom of thought to tackle the one goal and not two running into the games.
Do you get new boats every Olympic cycle? Like, we get new bikes, or do you always ride the same boat? Sail the same boat, not ride. Sail the same boat.
That's only when he's got his captain's hat on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the boats are to try and keep the sport cheap for the Olympic principles are not to try and make the sports extravagant, are they? So the materials we can use are again ancient materials, and so the reality is that the boats go soft. You know, they get kind of they genuinely get a bit waterlogged, even though you look after them really well. Over time, just get soft. So it's probably something like a boat a year we take.
Really?
A new boat, roughly, probably on balance. I reckon, so 15 years I've been doing it now. I reckon I've had 15 boats in that time.
That's a lot of plant pots.
That's a lot of plant pots. Can you imagine what that looks like? Each boat after the Olympics, that becomes, if there's any success, that is, that would be the you've got like a boat in the garden filled with ice and beers in it. That's basically what she turns into.
How much is a boat?
Yeah.
How much is a boat? Well, ours are fairly cheap. I mean, you would get a boat racing and on the water for maybe 20 grand in our discipline, which is reasonably cheap, and they're trying to keep it cheap. But the problem is, it's not like, it's similar to your sport. There's no price tag on some things because it's innovation. It's not even about, maybe you've got different aero handlebars from the last Olympics. It's not even about how much that costs, because it's just, you've just made them bespokely for that next games. So we're kind of in the same thing. Like, we'll innovate bits that ultimately cost, if you really want to break it down, hundreds of thousands of designing hours, manufacturing, thought that's gone into it, the people that have given the influence and how the project goes. So, they become, still you just sell it for what the materials are worth. But actually, what went into the piece of equipment was above and beyond what you would price it as.
Yeah, so it's all the intellectual. We have kind of the same thing. It's all the intellectual property and man hours that are spent, developing the thing in the first place. So let's touch on 2012. So I guess for like a first time Olympian, That's a pretty big deal to come away with a silver medal in the first instance. I think I'm saying that even though in my first Olympics I won two, but like you have Commonwealth Games to kind of prepare for that and all that kind of thing, so it doesn't feel as unusual. How did you kind of like approach that event with like a kind of successful mindset ultimately, and like the kind of end result being so successful as well?
Yeah, well, it's almost depressing hearing that. I feel like I peaked 10 years ago. Steady decline since London 2012.
Phil's in the same boat. Way.
Yeah.
I was weighing for the boat pun. I wasn't weighing for your lack of form, Phil.
Oh.
There's many boat puns. They can still come up.
I use a few of them in my Twitter, but anyway.
Yeah, I saw that actually recently. I posted that. I typed on it. There's a couple that just.
Let's stay away from controversy. You've already tried to unearth the British sailing selection policy. Let's keep it clean.
Yeah. No, London 2012. How did we get in the mindset? I mean, yeah, we were. It's funny as well. We were told. It's amazing what you hear when you try to get ready for an Olympics. You often hear things that I don't know. I can't think of the people that would say this, but I often heard, first-time Olympians almost never medal. You know, and it almost serves as a good driver to go, I'm going to prove you wrong. You know, fuck you. You know, I'll show you that's not the case in this. You know, and often. I think a home Olympics we all know what the pros and cons of that would be. But I mean, the home crowd, the expectation, and just your own sheer desire to perform it your home nation is above and beyond any pressure. For me, anyway, that public and things like that, and the team that could put on you. But we were lucky. We had a very experienced coach. Stuart and I, so my teammate for London was Stuart Bethel, and we had a really experienced coach who he was just wonderful at allowing the length of leash on us that still let us be quite creative and would allow us to take risks at the right time. You know, he would ground us every day. And one of the things I remember is, you know, to keep our minds in the right place. In the last sort of month leading up to the games and every race day at the games, we would have a perspective meeting. So we'd sit down, and this was over a coffee before anything else was said for the day or planned.
I mean, like, just to stop, I'm sure it will turn out well, but this sounds like something straight out of The Office.
Right. Yeah. Trust, encouragement. Yeah. I was trying to think of more quotes there, but I've lost them. Yeah. I've watched too much over the years as well. But he's just good. Morgan Reeser is our coach, and he was just so good at sitting down. We just talk about where we are at, you know, month out or midweek or something, and he'd just say, and what he was really good at is reminding us the whole thing's an opportunity. That was basically the whole thing that came out of it. He's like, you've neither won nor lost an Olympics yet, so neither should be a stress or a burden or a thought, you know, and that actually every single day you go out there is an opportunity. And he was great at reminding us, because he's done many Olympics himself, he's great at reminding us, like, I promise you, whatever happens in these 2 weeks, it'll never be like this again. You never do a home Olympics again. So however well this or badly this goes results-wise, this will probably still be the best 2 weeks of your life. And that was just what, you know, we were young 25-year-olds, cowboys, you know. That was really good for us to hear. I think that made us blossom into it. And we sailed the event of our lives. And we sailed the event of our careers to that point. And it's always a mindset, isn't it? I mean, sport, isn't it? By the time you're at an Olympics, it's not about what you do. It's just a mindset at the end of the day. So I think we just kept that perspective and just got in a rhythm. And we were the only ones still laughing and joking, smiling in the boat park before the race days. You know, I remember that story with you and Jason the night before the gold medal match there in Rio, and you're just still taking the mick and joking about, you know, that. Yeah. Like that. I think that's how it should be.
Yeah. Well, we went for a McDonald's, and I messed about trying to upset him at night time as well. So you can imagine what that might have entailed. But no, you're right. I think like that's something probably we took away as well. Like when we were even the Olympic final, like I was still pretty laughy and jokey, apart from maybe 10 minutes before the final. And you see the other nations just getting so amped and almost like overstressed, I guess. It's an interesting way to see it as like an opportunity, I guess, like regardless of the stress of it. But did you kind of actually, so you talked about kind of like the benefit of a home games, and obviously you've got a lot of that stuff on dry land, but do you actually have an appreciation for it being a home games out in the water? Because obviously the crowd are like a mile away?
Yeah, well, we had a couple of race courses which are close to the land, and you can actually hear which is one for us. Like obviously, you guys in velodromes, you have a crowd there. We will have helicopters and video cameras, but you never hear people. But for the first time ever, we heard people. And actually, Sparky had a good idea. I'm sales manager at the time. Like, let's just get a load of school kids down when we're training to scream off the wall, just see what it feels like. It wasn't a bad joke because it's completely alien to us, you know. Yeah, I think the thing that you get as a sailor from home advantage is it's weather patterns. You know, the best person to ask what the day is going to be like is the old fisherman on the shore of any place, seaside town on planet Earth. And so the closer you can get to being the old salty fisherman, the better off you are. Because the reality is, with the amount of variables and weather, patterns take years to pick up. Just years.
So yeah, once you get past all the stories about people that have passed, he's got some good information to pass on.
yeah. Thanks, then.
Oh, you never believe what it's like out there.
Yeah, no, it's never normally like this. That's the most common.
But did you ever bump into Philip Hines in 2012, and when he was getting papped outside a club in the middle of the night?
Do you know, I was trying to remember. The last time we saw each other, I think we snuck off for a sneaky pint before the parade in Manchester.
Yeah.
After Rio, and we dived over the barrier because we were waiting for half an hour and had it. No, I have heard about this pap story. The famous pap.
What's the famous pub story?
Yeah, no, just Google like Philip Hines.
Oh, right, yeah.
Club 2012 or something like that, and you've got Phil, like, he's just come out with these two random people, and I don't know how you convinced them to get there, Phil, because I believe you didn't actually speak to them that much, but
no,
this picture of him with his like white face, and it's just like,
I can't remember anything myself. I don't even know how I got home.
Oh, yeah.
Ari's after London. Woo.
That's a big part of it. But let's kind of like let's start. Just to fill in people on the BOA story before we move on that. That was a good day. So we went to the parade in Manchester. So it was the first parade, and the BOA had the audacity to put on a reception for the athletes before the parade without an open bar. So it was just cans of Coke, all that kind of stuff, and we were like, this is unacceptable. So we found the nearest like dodgy looking Manchester pub, dived in there. The BOA got a whiff of it and then popped in and went like, this is unacceptable, you're representing your nation. We're like, what do you know? They leave, and then all of a sudden the float leaves without us, so we have to dash out the pub and chase up after the float.
Chasing after the float, was it? Yeah. Cider in hand.
Yeah, and I was doing a British cycling Instagram takeover for that day, and I promptly got logged out about 20 minutes after Instagram does jogging after the float to get on it, yeah.
That was also, remember on the news, on that float there were two lads that had made fake GB tracksuits and medals, and I don't know what sport they pretended that they'd won.
I think we changed it.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Did they? What a bunch of heroes. I love guys like that.
You know, they've got quite a big YouTube channel, these two. They do it quite often, like sneak into like premieres and stuff.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they're quite big
they've
now.
made a thing out of this.
Yeah, they're quite big now.
What's their names?
Zach and Jay Show, it's called.
Oh, I'm going to look that up.
Yeah.
And not to badmouth the BOA, I do love the BOA, but if they'd been less focused on athletes lightly having a little drink before they get on the floor, they might have picked up on these two jokers. But anyway, you've got yourself in enough trouble revealing that selection policy.
So what did I? We can edit. I mean, we're not live right now.
Oh, yeah, we're live, yeah.
No, well, yeah, but I'm going to edit it so you describe some form of selection policy.
Yeah, exactly. Take the words out. Yeah. Weird, isn't it? We've got that tight.
But 2016 was like a very different Olympics for you for like a whole number of reasons. So obviously it was like second Olympic Games, but then also like, you know, you and your partner Elliot were selected for that. But then he had some like really unfortunate news, obviously. So would you mind like kind of talking us through that and then how that, you know, affected your lead up to the games? Because it was a massive deal, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's fine. You know, and Elliot's fine with me talking about it as well. But so we got our selection a year out, like the British tend to do, and we were really felt on track as a medal hopeful for Rio. We were at that point the Aussies were so utterly dominant, and we were one of the only boats that had beaten them in their dominance. Through that cycle, and we're feeling really good, and we did a lot of close battles with them. So we're moving into that autumn, thinking, right, we're on a real charge here to come out the blocks firing in spring, and then carry that through to Rio. And then Elliot just his sort of immune system started to he sort of felt like he was ill a lot, you know, and he was tired and he was struggling for energy a lot of the time. And he went through a number of tests because we're so well looked after as British athletes. So, you know, he went through a lot of that. And but long and short is he got diagnosed with bowel cancer that December. And, you know, I think it was just such a shock, you know, and it was such a shock through the team as well, you know, and of course, for Elliot and his close family, that's the biggest, most important thing. So so it was, you know, and it none of us there hadn't been anyone in the British sailing team that had something like that happen before. So it was brand new, and it was also, I think, quite a brand new thing within UK sport to have a current athlete go through that. And so, so Elliot got diagnosed in December, and for me, obviously, the whole thought of Rio kind of just turned off overnight. At that point, he didn't know how serious it was, you know, where he was going to be at, how recovery would look. So we were very much still talking about getting, hopefully, a quick dose of chemo and radiotherapy, and he'd be back in the boat, and we'd be racing, and we'd get on with Rio. But that wasn't to be. It was sadly much more aggressive, and they had to go through different things to get him back on his feet, which I'm happy to say he is. You know, Elliot is here, and he's healthy and he's well, and he's still involved in the British sailing team as one of the expert coaches, you know, that helps us all towards what we're doing. He's coached me a bit as well. So I then took on Twiggy, who I now sail with. Chris Groob is his real name. Really, you know, really kindly stood in, and that was hard for. Basically, what I felt so guilty carrying on with sailing while Elliot's going through treatment. But the way I was looking at it is that we had done so much work together in those 3 years that it felt right and proper to finish the job that Elliot and I had started. And whatever happened in Rio, he would have been 3 years part of that, you know. So, as I said earlier, there's, you know, it's a long, drawn out thing. You and your teammates try and get to the Olympic medal. So me and Twiggy basically had 7 months to try and sprint to get race ready for Rio. So we were fifth in the end, and I've got to say, obviously it's a completely different atmosphere. And I'm proud of the result. Not that I ever got in a boat to come fifth, but I'm proud of the result. I'm proud of what we did, and more than anything, just I was so pleased that Elliot was getting better the whole time. It would have been I'm not sure how I would have wanted to be racing if he was deteriorating, you know. So yeah, it was a tough old time, and I really feel for Elliot, because I know he was a double world champion, triple European champion. I mean, multiple medalists in the class, and this was his Olympics to go and produce his performance, and it never happened for him. And I know it's hard. But the thing is, the sport knows. You know, everyone knows that he was of that caliber. And maybe it doesn't mean enough for him that, but you know, everyone that raced him knows he was that athlete, and so it's kind of it's hard on all levels for him in that sense as well.
But it's odd when you deal with news like that, because it becomes, you know, almost instantly apparent that an event that you kind of quite often can build up as being life or death suddenly becomes immediately insignificant when something like that comes along. But the bit was about, like, you know, obviously the bond between, you know, you and your partner, it has to be strong, I presume. So I guess I kind of got a kind of two-part question. Was Elliot's mindset still very much about, like, you need to keep going, you need to keep pushing? And then, you know, because of that supportive bond, and then, you know, how did you look to build it with Twiggy so quickly?
I mean, at first we were still talking, like I said, talking to, hopefully Elliot will recover quickly and we can get back in the boat maybe in spring, and get 3-4 months before Rio, which we then realised was not the case. So, but up until that point, we were talking, and I think perhaps, well, I don't know. I'm making assumptions now, but perhaps it was a nice distraction for him. But I don't know that definitely. But so that was still the plan at that point. But then quickly he deteriorated for a period of time, which was, I can only imagine, meant all out the window. Like, forget all that crap. You know, it's not even about sailing or sport or anything right now. There's a much bigger goal here. And so that was at the point where Twiggy and I were like, right, we've got a short period of time. Like, this is what we need to do. So it was trying to, it taught me a lot, you know, to try and fast track how you might dynamically, how you work with someone, because the partnership is a big deal. It's not, you can't go around hating each other and it not going very well. So
it worked for Phil and I.
Yeah, the Instagram gang. But so yeah, Twig and I had to really try and fast track that, and I could probably write a book on teamwork in a minute, but we, you know, it felt like we quickly got to a stage where we were able to say anything. It was all objective. It was all about the goal, and the timeline helped that. Like, there was no room to you know, there was no room to get it wrong, but there's certainly no room to find yourself frustrated about something. You would just say things early. We'd nip things in the bud early, and we'd just say it how it is, and we took it as no egos. You know, it's just trying to make as much of the situation as we can. So that helped us. We do a lot of hours talking to try and get there, though. You know, there was a lot of time spent working through how we do this. You know, we've got a matter of weeks, 3-4 months. You know, how we go about it. Really interesting period. And like you said, it's the perspective, isn't it? You know, something suddenly life or death. Now it's not. Or we treated it like it wasn't, you know, because it isn't life or death. And I think that aided the conversations, because it was always assume goodwill. Our whole ethos was assume goodwill. You know, no one saying anything as an attack. And we tried to carry that sentence through with us the whole time, and it got us far. We were close. Like, fifth was, we were so close at the end, you know?
I guess one of the bits that I'm like kind of quite interested in from a personal kind of teamwork perspective was there was one race that I did like way back in the day, and it seemed like it was a World Cup, but it seemed like a massive deal because I'd never raced anything like that before. But the guy who was selected before me was pulled out of that race for something that wasn't cycling related. It was kind of disciplinary. It was kind of a few other things going on. And one of the things that I kind of really struggled to get over with in that instance was like the imposter syndrome, I guess, because it was like, this guy was selected fair and square and he's done something that's got nothing to do with cycling, and that's why he's not going. Like, is that one of the major challenges you had to try and build as part of that team about, trying to push on despite the circumstances, despite, starting to reevaluate whether, health is worth more than sport and what actually is your biggest goal in life,
Yeah, no, that's what you're sort of describing there is I can really relate to all that, and I know that Twiggy felt desperately guilty about stepping in Elliot's shoes, and Twiggy's such a good, humble guy. He's really and now he's earned it all in his own right. But I know he felt desperately guilty, and that dominated my thoughts a lot as well. I never really left feeling guilty about even going to the Olympics, whilst Elliot was still lying in a bed getting therapy for his cancer, it never felt right, It was understandably a totally different environment to London 2012. It didn't have that same buoyancy and fun about it. It felt like we were doing, I felt like I was doing a duty. I was on a mission and doing a duty, and trying to justify it, like I said earlier, I was finishing a job that Elliot and I started. And Twiggy and I also, we would talk through that as well, because I think both of us felt the same. The whole thing was based on Elle. So, what did you call it? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was. It sounds a very similar thing. I
mean, I still get that now, being in like marketing agencies. I'm kind of like, people here have done degrees on this shit, and I'm just hanging around, But like, I think it's something that a lot of athletes have, is that continual, almost like self-doubt. Like, it doesn't matter what they're portraying on the outside, but I think a lot of us have that kind of almost imposter-like syndrome, because, competition doesn't lie. It's fiercely obvious where you stand. For us, it's like, 20 times a day you'll be measured on, 40 different metrics. You know what I mean? Like, you always know exactly where you stand, and that can be tough. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I always feel like mostly comfortable and everything feels right when I'm on the boat and racing. I always get misjudged by it. Everyone thinks I love this circus and going up on the podium and talking all that. I actually don't. I hate that moment of prize giving when you're about to get called up for your medal or something. I hate that, and I don't like standing up there either. It all feels right when you're on the boat. And maybe, I don't know if it feels the same for you boys, like on the bike, that's just where it should end, start and end. The circus afterwards, I always feel uncomfortable about.
I just remember looking at Phil, where he's trying to force out a tear at God Save the Queen.
Well, you think about when a dog died in your childhood. The emotion.
Do you reconcile that into looking back on it as a positive time? Obviously not in comparison to London, but for overcoming that adversity, I guess, and kind of finishing the job that you and Elliot set out to do.
Yeah, I mean, I look back at it and think, God, I was exhausted. The whole thing exhausted me. But again, it's just so easy to just pass it off for the perspective that Elliot was lying in bed. Like the whole, you know what I mean? Like, whatever I say about Rio, I feel guilty for even saying it, because it just feels ridiculous to say, I was tired and things like that. Well, were you? Someone else was fighting for their life, So, but I do feel accomplishment. I am proud of what we did. And it definitely was a key point in my life, which taught me some valuable things that helped me with my mindset to be more level-headed, to see the wood for the trees, all that kind of stuff, and kind of take winning and losing for what it is. And that's definitely been of benefit in these years, because I originally I had maybe had a thought that I'd retire from Olympic sailing, and I finished Rio exhausted, and I thought I'll just give it a year. Like I'll take at first I thought I'll just take 3 months out, and that 3 months kept getting that probation, and before you knew it was over a year, before I gathered the hunger again and thought one more. I felt uncomfortable leaving the sport that I dreamed about for so long in that place. Right, one more, let's do this proper. Let's do a 3-year campaign, which has turned into a 4-year one because of COVID.
That's a good segue to land on to our next section before we finish off. And before we do, it's great to hear that Elliot's doing well. And it's congratulations to you and Twiggy. That's a lot to deal with, and to come through that and to see through the other side.
Yeah, no, it's a great friend, and he has been, and I've raced against him for years, and he coached me when I was 12. He's 2 or 3 years older than me, 2 years older than me. And so he coached me when I was a nipper and stuff. So we've been great friends. So it's all good to talk these things through with him and stuff. And we still shared many a medal together. When we did do our 3 years. So yeah, it's grand.
Good, that's good to hear. So let's move on to the weekly COVID chat. So you've obviously been selected for the next Olympic Games. Looking like 2021. One of the things I really wanted to ask you was, I was speaking to a few journalists because I was bored and doing the rounds. But one of and it was also came up in the BOA Athletes Commission. But one of the main questions was, what do we do for the athletes that have already been selected? And this applied to canoe slalom as well. It's like, do we reselect and make everyone go through that all over again, or do we just stick with the selections? I know sailing selects a long way out, but was that a bit of a tense time for you?
Definitely. Yeah, it was real tense, because I obviously, everyone's treading new footsteps each day, like everything that gets postponed or cancelled. No one had really been through this before. So I worried it would reset, and then I kind of, and like we talked about earlier, if you just immediately switches the goals, switches everything that you're focused on, and even could change how you train and where you train, so it has a massive bearing. If we ever get back on the water to train, that is. But yeah, it was tense. But I don't know what the internal conversations are between the federations and Team GB and stuff, but I'm pleased. I am pleased with the decision they made. What's hard though is it probably, objectively speaking, you'd almost do it case by case. Let's say there's a discipline which is really tight and it was a hard selection. Maybe you'd say, well, should we just maybe carry that on a bit longer? Actually, because what if there's a tipping point of those 2, 3, 4 athletes, whatever it is. And if there's one where there's just a clear dominance and someone's not, then maybe you could say, well, but you can't do that, can you? It's so much resource going into case by case. They have to do a flat rule for everyone. And then at least it's fair. It's fair to do that. But I was tense, yeah.
And I guess for Phil, it was maybe a bit of a different emotion for you when you heard about the postponement in the first place, because Phil's still targeting that selection in the first place, but you've essentially got your ticket in your hand, and then for them to say, oh, by the way, it's going to be next year.
Yeah.
Like, how did you manage to deal with that? Is it change anything specifically, or is it just kind of quite matter of fact, athlete mindset, straight on to the next one kind of thing?
No, I have to say it hit me reasonably hard. I was disappointed. Of course, the right decision, obviously. Like, no one's going to argue that, I don't think. Obviously, the right decision made to postpone. But I think I was because I was in a metaphorical sprinting mode, getting ready for race one. I really like that. I'm not a man for training. I'm not. My enjoyment is D-Day. My enjoyment is when it matters most. The whole circus has come together, and you're racing for your life. That for me is the enjoyment I get from the sport. So I was really excited and motivated by the fact it was 20 days to go, 30 days to go. So to add a year onto that, it's almost taken me 4 weeks to kind of settle into that new thought and go, actually, do you know what? It's just more opportunity to nip up some areas that weren't going to be quite perfect in time. Well, nothing's ever perfect, but quite polished in time. So, that's how you objectively deal with it. But I was disappointed.
What does actually a training day look like for you as a sailor? Because with us we do weightlifting, we can ride our bike on the turbo, but as a sailor, I guess you can't go out on the water. And what do you do on land? During
lockdown, you mean?
Yeah.
Like now?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I've actually, as of Friday just gone, I've taken 2 weeks off. To just actually relax.
And you know what, mate? You deserve it.
It's how ridiculous does that sound? But I've built a gym in the garden. I mean, we do. My whole thing is muscular endurance, really. So that's where I target most there's a lot of threshold training on the turbo, which is your bread and butter.
No, not quite. But anyway, that's too unpleasant, mate. You never want to do that.
Yeah. You just push till you vomit.
Yeah.
But I've got the turbo up here, and the home gym made out of rocks and wood.
Nice.
That's about it, though. Like, especially if all our manufacturers are shut, because it's us that me and Twiggy, we run our equipment development. So we take expertise, but we run it. So we make the decisions of where it goes, and we bring on people that are better physicians and materialists than we are to give us advice, but ultimately all the decisions come down to us about where it goes. So that involves a ton of talking and what they call it, blue skying. Let's just blue sky this stuff for a minute.
That's what I meant earlier about it being so empowering, because at BC you're very much kind of your job is to be the physical asset in that picture. Your job is to get on the bike and go as quick as you can. And we've talked to Dan Bingham before, who's pretty well known aerodynamicist, and he was pretty candid about it. He said that he was told you have to decide whether you're going to be an athlete or an engineer. But it sounds like you guys get to get your teeth into it.
Totally. I mean, yeah. So on that point, yeah, we are absolutely the managers of our program. Obviously, we've got an Olympic manager and a PD, but we are given the freedom to do what's right for you. And I don't know why. I think it's probably like that because it's so much of it is height and weight dependent. How you develop your equipment, how stiff or soft your elements are, your mass, and obviously the lingo and your centerboards. That won't mean anything to anyone. And how powerful or how depowered your sails are. If you're heavy, light, tall, small, you name it. So yeah, we do everything. No, we got lots of people helping us. We've got a full army helping us, but everything comes back to us all the time, which is maybe the adventure aspect we talked about earlier. That isn't it. But also I find that tiring because I find it tricky to actually just be a racer and a sailor sometimes, because you're being a different personality, maybe for different people. One moment you're trying to understand manufacturing timelines and doing that. Then you're down the gym, being an athlete for a minute. Then you're having a conversation about planning and how we schedule up to that event. And then you go sailing, and it feels like you've taken on board 4 different personas or sort of different skill sets. It sometimes feels like the last thing you are is a sailor.
Yeah, but I think to me that actually sounds pretty attractive as a proposition, but you can see why it would kind of maybe weigh you down over time.
I actually want to know what's next for you, because Callum said he's gonna do some.
No, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about that.
No.
Oh, another secret thing.
The Greg Laidlaw / all on a boat project.
Oh no, that's not a secret per se.
That's not a secret.
Oh, is it not?
No,
I thought that was a secret. Oh, I'd love to talk about that. I've got so many ideas.
Oh no, that's not a secret at all. I mean, I don't even know if Rowan's spoken to Greg or not. But so what's next for me? That was one of the reasons I was disappointed at the games being postponed. I was excited by my next venture. So we talked about the ocean race. So I desperately want to start an ocean race team. So the ocean race is basically the race lasts for about 8 months, and what happens is the race gives you the course around the planet. So you're essentially hopping city to city in the different continents. Usually you stop at about 10 or 11 cities around the planet, and what happens is you race from one city to the next city, and you stay there then for 2 weeks in that city. And the reason you stay there for 2 weeks or so is so the sort of show and the circus of the race can come to town and excite and give the city back some whatever that brings, a bit of revenue and stuff like that, and to get the boats ready for the next leg and to rest the bodies, So it might look something like Alicante to Lisbon, which is short, and then Lisbon down to Cape Town up to Perth. I'm trying to get my head around where we're on the globe now. Anyway, you get the picture. So that's why it takes 8 months to do the race. So I want to run and lead a team in the ocean race.
I'm keen.
And my idea was to fly under the Scottish flag. And my idea was to maybe get on board people that don't necessarily. Well, we're getting too deep now, do you think?
Nah.
I mean, we've not got a competition for it. It's just fun. I was thinking to get some of the crowd on that might not necessarily be sailors.
Yeah.
See if Greg's up for it now that he's hung up the boots from Team Scotland. Maybe Eve would be up for it. Hey, Phil, you'd be an asset with them muscles as well, mate.
Nah, it has to be Scottish. Phil would have to let Economy Games for Scotland.
Nah, I'm Scottish. Okay. I'm a bit I live on the Scottish border.
Exactly. And you get married in Gretna Green.
Yeah.
The exciting bit about this is, like, whenever I talk about doing something, like whether it's an Ironman or something like that, Phil's like, no fucking way, you're going to be shit. It's like, there's no way you'll ever be successful at any other sport. Like, take a look at yourself, mate. So I'm keen to hear his thoughts about how he thinks I'd get on being a sailor.
Yeah, exactly. Here, if there's sailors listening to this, I'll be getting laughed at right now. I promise you. What we just said, I'll be getting laughed at. But just you wait. We've learned, haven't we, that get laughed at, it just pushes you harder. Big projects like that, I've definitely taken a back seat with the old COVID.
Mate, there couldn't be a better time. What are you doing all day?
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm on holiday, remember? I've had a hard life.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think the Olympics is going to happen?
I hope it does, but I think they wouldn't look at further postponement. They'd look at cancellation if it doesn't go ahead in summer 2021. So that's a big deal.
I saw that article of I can't remember, one of the chiefs at TOCOG, I think, said perhaps if they don't find a vaccine, how unlikely it would be, far away to make any.
Yeah, so you got to keep on pushing, get back in that wood and stone gym, mate.
Exactly, yeah.
But anyway, it's been a pleasure to have you on, mate. Some really good stories, actually. I really enjoyed it. It's always nice to sit down with a friend. Not that anyone else hasn't been a friend, but you know what I mean. So we always give the end of the podcast to plug your social media channels, any sponsors, anything like that. So if you've got anything to say, now's your time.
Oh goodness, I never even thought that. Well, the sponsors are all probably hating the fact that it's all been postponed for a year, hasn't it? I don't know if that means the contract end or continue. No, I mean Volvo are being great to us, and we've been partnered with them for many years. So it's always nice to have these partners involved. And yeah, there's a few people that work for us behind the scenes that they'd probably be embarrassed if I named them. So but
my next car is actually a Volvo. I was inspired by you, so you can go back to them and say, look, I actually convert into sales.
Oh, nice. Did you buy it?
At least in an S60.
Nice. Oh, an S60. Oh, so you're going for a bit of sport.
Yeah, it's got a bit of kick.
Yeah.
But it's also sensible and has those nice like Thor lights on the front.
Honestly, the Volvos are
Here we go.
They are. But do you know the best bit about the Volvos? Because we trail our boats around Europe the whole time. The Volvo's got a camera on the tow hitch. Right, so when you're reversing up to try and hook all your kit on, there's a camera there telling you, no, you've missed it again. No, you've missed it again. No, you've missed it again. God knows what it'll be like when I get back on the old, get back on a normal car.
Well, not after that advert, mate. I think you're safe.
Slogan used to be Team Volvo for life. You know how companies have different slogans now and then.
Phil's probably going to have to balance it out with Skoda, but I'm not going to let him. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and tune in next week. And thanks a lot for coming on, Luke. Cheers.
Cheers.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, boys.